If you're applying to business school, I want to help you think about how can you demonstrate your leadership potential as part of your narrative. This is one of the most important elements of any application at top business schools. My name is Mike. I spent 17 years at Stanford's Graduate School of Business, where I was the executive director of the Center for Leadership Development and Research, and later the director of the Stanford MSX program and a director of admissions. I helped oversee the launch of the core leadership curriculum in both the Stanford MBA and Stanford MSX programs. I co-developed the school's 360-degree leadership assessment, and I read thousands of applications to the school and made decisions about who got admitted. Today, I help applicants get admitted to the most competitive business schools. I also developed an AI-powered platform that can help you analyze and strengthen your business school application on several dimensions. You can find it at mbai.app. That's mbai.app, and I encourage you to start with the free tools that are offered. So the first thing to understand is that your overall application will generally be judged based on three questions that any school will want to answer. One, are you going to be a great student? This is about intellectual aptitude and academic attitude. Will you succeed academically and push your classmates intellectually? Second, are you going to be a great alum? This is about leadership potential and career momentum. They want to know that you'll be influential and make an impact in your company, your industry, and your community. They want to know that you'll represent the brand of the school well. And third, what unique contributions can you make? This is about showing that you can fit in while standing out. They want to believe that you'll be compatible with the school's values, the school's culture, but at the same time that you have some experience, some perspective, or some expertise that will uniquely add value. Taken together, this is really the basis for your narrative. This is how you show that you have something to offer the school. It's a value proposition, and that you will also be able to benefit significantly from the program. So I want to talk about the leadership component. What do schools mean when they talk about leadership potential? We had a saying at Stanford that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. I mean, let's face it, when it comes to admissions, talk is cheap. Anybody can claim to have great potential. What schools want to see is evidence of demonstrated behaviors that are known indicators of that potential. This is far more important than titles or what companies you work for. So what do these behaviors look like? I want to show you a map. This form is used by Stanford Graduate School of Business, and it's actually been used by many schools over the years as part of their letters of recommendation. They ask recommenders to evaluate you on a scale of 1 to 5 on these 12 leadership dimensions. It's basically a competency matrix. It has 12 leadership skills or behaviors with a scale of 1 to 5, but it's not a simple 1 to 5 scale because the form actually provides a qualitative description for each of the rankings, 1 to 5, on each of the 12 leadership behaviors. What does a 1 look like? What does a 2 look like? What does a 3 look like? With an actual narrative description. This is a goldmine. It's like a very clear and granular picture of what schools consider to be strong, demonstrated leadership. It's not a mystery. And I saw admissions readers going through applications like bloodhounds, essentially looking for examples of these behaviors and using that to assess applicants. So use this matrix. Look at how each behavior is described, especially what it looks like to be a 4 or a 5, and see if you can find 3 to 5 of these where you believe you would be a solid 4 or 5. Make sure that you can provide specific examples that you can work into your applications, especially things that are recent, say the last 2 or 3 years. Maybe less intuitively, you should also identify at least 1 or 2 of these that you think are weak spots for you, either because it's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to you, or perhaps because it's just a behavior that you don't have much chance to exhibit in the work that you do. I'll speak a bit later about how you can think about these areas for development, which is an important component of your overall narrative. Before we get to that, let's talk about your application as a whole. There's several parts of the application where you can and should focus on your leadership story. Your resume and work history, your activities or extracurriculars, your essays, your letters of recommendation are the 4 main ones. Each can shed light on your leadership experience, but they serve different roles, and it's important to distinguish between them. The mistake I see many applicants make is that they focus on each of these components separately without really understanding how they can work together most effectively. This often leads them to be repetitive on some things while missing out on other dimensions of their leadership. So let's talk about each of these components briefly. First, your resume and work history is where you need to show that you take initiative and get results. It's typically the most impact-focused portion of your application, and you should lean into this. You want to make sure that your resume conveys not just action, but effective action, meaning your action tied to outcomes. Second, your activities or activities and awards portion of your application can extend or broaden the perceived scope of your leadership. If the activities are closely aligned with your professional trajectory, it shows a consistency and seriousness that can be powerful. This is what I mean by extending the sense of your leadership potential. If your activities and awards focus on different ground, then this can broaden your leadership story a bit. Obviously, you have to work with what you have, but be thoughtful and strategic about what this part of your application is saying about you. Your letters of recommendation play an important role. It offers third-party validation for much of what you may be claiming in the rest of the application, especially when it comes to professional accomplishments. In particular, it's not enough that they validate what was achieved. They need to offer a perspective on how you achieved it, in particular, how you demonstrated leadership. This adds depth and color to everything that you describe in your application. Many schools ask that one of your recommenders be a current or a recent supervisor. Why? Because it is your supervisor's job to evaluate your performance and assess your leadership potential. Now, you may not have a great boss or you may not have a great relationship with your boss, so this is something to navigate, but it indicates what it is that they want to get from your application. Specific behavioral examples that show how you influence and impact others, get results, and act strategically, and statements that can compare you favorably to other high performers within the organization. Not abstract statements. It needs to be personal and specific to your context in order to make it feel credible and grounded. Last but not least are your essays. This is like the glue that holds together all the different parts of your application. Whether you realize it or not, your application is going to tell a story. And your resume, your transcripts, your test score, your recommendation letters, they're all like plot points. You have some influence, but some of these things are in the past, and so they're set in stone. Your essay is where you get to be the narrator of your story, and you get to use your own voice and set your own context. In terms of leadership, you have a chance to show your thought process, not what you did or even how you did it, but why. This is an aspect of your leadership that only you can describe in your words. And without it, your profile might be impressive. You might have a lot of accomplishment and well-deserved recognitions. And for some school, that's enough. But your application will lack depth if you can't articulate your thought process and do some self-critique as a leader. I've spent decades in the field of leadership development. So I've worked with a lot of leaders and I've worked with a lot of people trying to become better leaders. Some people start with natural gifts as a leader. It's true, but nobody is perfect. And if you want to develop your leadership ability effectively over time, you need to be able to reflect, observe yourself critically. And the more effectively you can articulate this thought process, the more likely it is that you'll be able to adapt your leadership in new challenges. Here's the good news. This is an opportunity. It's not just about getting into the best business school. After all, going to business school is about preparing yourself to become a better leader. So think of this as being about getting yourself ready for this educational journey. If you focus on this, rather than what you think it is that the admissions office needs to hear, it can actually be more meaningful, and more often than not, it actually yields better outcomes. So what sort of story should you tell? If you think about great stories, The Odyssey, Star Wars, Hamilton, Thelma and Louise, Lord of the Rings, Finding Nemo, I don't know. What do they have in common? They follow an arc, and typically that arc is called the hero's journey. It was popularized by Joseph Campbell, who is a scholar of myth and mythology. And the hero's journey involves a main character leaving their comfortable life behind, facing a series of trials and hardships, then having to transcend in some way to reach a new level of understanding or a new level of capability. It may or may not have a happy ending, but it needs to have conflict. It needs tension, or it's boring. Too often, I would read applications where the applicant's idea of the hero's journey was that they were always the hero. They would describe how they always had the right answer, they always made the right decision, they always got the right result. Boring, unmemorable, not very credible. Is that someone that you feel drawn to or really want to get to know better? Me neither. Then I'd read an essay from someone describing all of their struggles, their doubts, and honestly acknowledging their limitations. And these tended to be more interesting. Now, obviously, that wouldn't get you admitted to Stanford just because they wrote a great essay or displayed emotional vulnerability. They had to have an impressive track record, reflected in other parts of their application, of intellect, of results orientation, having real influence and capacity for strategic thinking. In those cases, an essay that showed an emotional range that involved some conflict and struggle could be extremely effective. Ken Burns said the best argument never changed a single person's point of view. The only thing that does that is a great story. Admissions readers have to absorb hundreds of applications and applicant profiles, and they do their best to rate your application at the time they read it, and they try to do that objectively and fairly. But the only way to break through the cognitive overload they face is to get them to connect with your story emotionally. When I was reading applications, I was lucky if I remembered the basic facts about an applicant a few days after reviewing their application. But the best ones, I remember a strong narrative that connected important aspects of their profile days, weeks, even months later. What does that look like? This approach isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's a good starting place to consider. Think about the 3 questions I mentioned earlier, the 3 aspects of your application that I described. Notice that the overlapping portions of these circles are darker. This is where you should look first for stories, for examples, for anecdotes to incorporate in your application. Ideally, rather than telling 3 separate stories to form your narrative, there's a way that you can tell one, a single narrative that addresses all 3 of these areas. I say ideally because it shouldn't feel forced or artificial, and in some cases, it's really difficult to do that. But starting with your personal background, think about what formative experiences have influenced you, how that has shaped your thinking, your intellectual journey, what you studied or what you learned. In turn, how did this influence your work, your leadership, the impact that you've been able to make? And finally, what does this all mean for your future goals and the legacy that you hope to leave? This is an integrated narrative structure that addresses the 3 questions. For it to be an effective story, however, it has to be grounded in your personal experiences with a strong narrative voice, especially with an ability to reflect on your leadership. So, a few takeaways. Remember, to demonstrate leadership potential, show behavioral evidence of leadership behaviors and traits that business schools value. If the schools you're applying to don't have a specific set of leadership behaviors that they articulate, use the Stanford grid that I shared. Now, many schools will have leadership values that they talk about or principles. These are different than leadership behaviors, and you should focus on those and incorporate that in your application, but you still need to focus on the behavioral elements of demonstrating your leadership. Third, make sure that you are using each portion of your application effectively. Use your resume and work history to demonstrate results and give clear behavioral evidence. Your recommendation should provide comparative evaluation and describe your ability to influence others. Activities can extend or broaden the field in which you operate as a leader, and your essay should reveal something about your rationale, your motivations, why you do what you do. Make sure you work with your recommenders so that they have a very clear sense of what to discuss and why. And finally, think about the story that you're telling and use your essays to narrate that story in a way that's memorable and emotionally resonant. That's it. Easy peasy, right? Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you think I can help. You can leave a comment below or visit my platform at mbai.app, where you can also schedule a quick chat. If you found this helpful, subscribe to see additional videos on business schools, admissions, and leadership development. Remember, if you stop thinking of life as a gift, it'll stop being a gift. Till next time, Mike out.